Today I'm exploring Fortnite's lost media. Updates Epic were planning to add, but instead they deleted. And these were lost to history. But through leaks, research, and exploring the game files, players were able to uncover these hidden updates. Like, for example, players discovered an early and unfinished trailer from the Fortnite alpha, where we saw characters doing the T-pose years before it ever entered the item shop. There was no music, just some sound effects, and this was a very unfinished project. But what was interesting is that at the very end of the trailer, the name Fortnite appears. And it looks like Epic originally might have planned to spell the game like this, with it being Fortnight instead of the classic Fortnite that we know today. And honestly, I'm glad they didn't go with the old spelling because the current one just is much cleaner. The only real media that we have of this is from the 2011 VGA trailer. For this video, I really wanted to find super obscure facts and media about Fortnite that most of you watching have never seen before, and a lot of these are considered truly lost media until today. So Epic Games actually used to run their own in-house hockey tournaments, and their employees used to stream them. If you look really closely, you can see the employees even have their own hockey jerseys that featured Peely and a llama. With Epic being hockey fans, it's kind of interesting that we haven't seen a hockey skin or NHL collaboration in Fortnite, but it doesn't mean that it won't eventually happen. Number 3, the initial concept of Fortnite started back in 2011. This is when development from the game began, and although Epic started with Save the World, they actually worked on a PvP mode even before Battle Royale was even a concept. In 2015, Epic had a PvP mode called Weather the Storm that even went as far as having playtests. And even though the PvP mode didn't stick, you might notice based on this description, 2 teams gather resources, craft weapons, and fortify their core. A dinosaur and unicorn tip the balance and destroy their core. The idea was actually very similar to a future LTM that we saw come to Fortnite called Food Fight. We'll never actually get to try out or access the original PvP mode, but this was the original building blocks of what we know as Battle Royale today. At number 4, before Battle Breakers ever hit mobile devices in 2019, Epic was working on a spin-off called Fortnite World Explorers. This was around 2014, way before Battle Royale was a thing. It was a mobile game where players built a party of heroes, battled enemies, and tried to control sections of the map. Not much media from it exists today, but the little that has surfaced definitely has the early Save the World vibe. It was Fortnite's first steps into expanding its universe years before Chapter 1 even began. And number 5, the early versions of Fortnite, back when it was called Fortress Game Era, were only tested in private, so there's pretty much no media or gameplay from that time. Then in 2014 to 2017, Fortnite started to do online tests. Players were able to download the alpha via codes or be invited to tests. However, due to the NDA agreements, not a lot of footage was shared online and players had to keep it hush. There was someone though who decided to risk their NDA and shared some of the earliest versions of Fortnite that we have access to. This version of Fortnite was pretty close to what we got with the actual release of Alpha Fortnite. And did you know there was physical copies of Fortnite that used to exist back in 2017 when Fortnite was just Save the World? Once Battle Royale was announced, the focus went to digital downloads, and production of physical Fortnite products stopped in 2018. There was some bundles that dropped, like Deep Freeze bundle, which included the physical copy of Save the World and some cosmetics for Battle Royale, but those physical copies are considered rare and collector's items now. I actually have a few of them, so I should probably hold on to them. Epic will likely never release physical copies of the game now that everyone downloads it online. At 7, if you're an OG player, you might remember that the default dance originally had 3 different music tracks that played randomly. Now there are only 2 different tracks that would play, but there was an original 3rd track that had more of a country sound to it. This was removed sometime in mid-2018 because it sounded a little bit too similar to George Michael's song Faith, and Epic was worried about copyright issues. And speaking of the default dance, you would only know this if you played Fortnite before Battle Royale even existed. In Fortnite Save the World Alpha, there were lyrics that played when you used the default dance.
Oh, I am a soldier. That's right, I got guns and bullets. Yeah, good to fight.
The lyrics changed depending on which skin you were wearing, so there was a number of different versions. I'm not sure why they decided to remove this, but it was a little bit goofy on some of the skins.
You see this house? I'm dancing on your graves.
And at 9, there's been a few iterations of music for other emotes as well. Crazy Feet actually used to sound like this. And the weird thing is that it only seemed to change with female skins. This isn't the only music that got changed with an emote. Intensity also used to have a different music track. I definitely prefer the choice Epic ended up making in the final release. At number 10, Save the World players might be familiar with Mimic Bombs. Epic was actually looking into adding them into Battle Royale. Mimic Bombs would have been normal looking chests, but they would explode when a player got close or when the chest got shot. This could have definitely made for some hilarious moments, but it looks like they decided not to add them into BR. At number 11, back in Chapter 1, Epic actually used to drop developer update videos on YouTube. They'd walk through the new features, items, settings, sometimes even teasing what was coming in the future. It really felt like they were very tapped into the community, but the last one that dropped was all the way back in July 2018. And not long after, we also stopped getting detailed patch notes. It's never been officially explained why they pulled back on dev updates, but some think it's because players were roasting the changes even before trying them, or even personally attacking developers, which is always a no-go. Epic probably wants people to experience the updates first before forming an opinion based off of what they share. At 12, Epic was actually working on a new port of Fortress called CT Port A Fort B. And this thing was massive. It's speculated that it was created for 50 versus 50, but due to how big the fortress was, it likely would have caused some pretty bad lag or even server crashes. So it makes sense why Epic decided not to release them in the actual game, because Port of Fortress actually did cause some games to crash when they were spammed, so this one would have definitely had the same result. During Season 4, we had a huge event with the rocket launch. Leading up to it, there were a ton of clues suggesting multiple POIs were about to be wiped out. But the main one the community noticed was Tilted Towers. All signs pointed towards Tilted being destroyed. But if you were at the live event, you know that it ended up being Dusty Divot that got hit instead. The crazy part is that Donald Mustard later confirmed that Tilted was originally supposed to be destroyed. The community had theories that we might see this happen with Fortnite OG and with the rocket launch event we just had, but it looks like we'll never see what that storyline might have looked like. At 14, in 2019, there were posters around Korea that featured Fortnite characters and the actor Chris Pratt. People thought it might have been a leak for a Fortnite movie at first, but it was actually just an ad to get people in Korea to play Fortnite. And I guess Chris Pratt was playing a character that was kind of taunting Korean gamers, trying to get them to play the game. And the community is still waiting for a Fortnite movie. And if there is one, I would love to make a cameo or be involved in any way. At 15, during Chapter 1, around Fort Nightmares, players started to notice red balloons tied to storm drains. And when you would pop one, you would hear that creepy Pennywise laugh from it. The balloons even came back in Chapter 2, but the skin and collab never showed up. It feels like Epic might have thought Pennywise was just a little too creepy for Fortnite, but now we have a lot of creepy collaborations, so if anything, maybe it just fell through the cracks. At 16, during the end of Season X, Epic was testing the idea of changing builds. They were looking to change the edit mode material and to make it appear more opaque so that you couldn't see through them while you were editing. This would have changed things like being able to see through cones, and it's wild to think how different Fortnite would be if they actually made this change. And at 17, Epic used to give out exclusive Fortnite themed pins to their employees for each season. I think they still do this. Everything from creative mode, World Cup, and even the Storm King got their own pins. But when COVID hit, that kind of slowed down. The last one for a while was a general work from home pin, and recently though, they've started to make a comeback. We've seen new pins for Fall Guys, Fortnite Festival, Lego Fortnite, Reload, Chapter 2, and all the new seasons. They are super limited obviously because only Epic employees get them, but it would be awesome for Fortnite to eventually release a public pin collection that the community could get their hands on. At 18, the Burning Wolf skin came out in Fortnite's crew pack, and as usual, there was a trailer with its release. It came out in a different art style though, and it was actually narrated by Midas. It was also originally called Animated Comic Number 1, implying that there was going to be more. But within minutes of this going live, the trailer was actually removed and it was never talked about ever again. I'm not sure what went down with this trailer, but we still don't have any answers. And then in December 2019, there was an interesting leak that was found in the files. Fortnite was working on something called 2020 Annual Pass. It would have included exclusive cosmetics and 25% of the content from every battle pass that year. Some of the skins included Astra, Bash, and Brilliant Bomber. The craziest part, it was only going to be $60, which may seem like a lot, but when you consider 3 skin bundles and 4 battle passes with a quarter of the content unlocked, that would have been a pretty good deal. The annual pass actually never came to Fortnite, and instead they went with the crew pack, and until today we still do not have the Brilliant Bomber as a purchasable skin, but a lot of people are hoping it eventually comes to the shop. At 20, one of the most interesting leaks that came from the Epic versus Apple lawsuit. It wasn't even a skin or a collab, it was a full-on arcade style basketball mode. The leaked images showed unique animations for stealing, shooting, and even dunking. It looks like there were plans for 1v1, 2v2, 3v3, and even 4v4 matches. Some people thought this might have finally dropped when kicks were added, but as of now, the basketball mode is still in development maybe, or they canned it. We're not too sure. But Epic, if you're watching this, we're ready for Fortnite basketball. At 21, in the original Party Royale trailer, you could actually spot Kirby in the bottom right corner. Yes, that Kirby. It's unclear if there was originally going to be a collaboration with Kirby in Fortnite or why exactly Kirby was in the trailer, but Epic ended up removing the original trailer and re-uploading it with Kirby blurred out, so maybe they received a legal notice not to include Kirby in the trailer. And then during the Chapter 2 launch, we see Jonesy jump out of the bus. Then there's a lot of Fortnite characters in the background doing Fortnite emotes. And if you look at the cowgirl on the left, you can see that she's doing an emote. People may have missed this emote, but the leakers found an emote called Belly Dance, but we never saw it added to the game. And even though we're in Chapter 6, we still haven't seen this emote added into Fortnite. Epic must have thought that the emote was a little too suggestive and decided not to add it to the game. Kind of makes sense, but some other emotes that have come out since are just as suggestive, so I don't know. At 23, Epic actually was working on something called consumable emotes. Yes, emotes that once you use them, they were gone. These were going to be purchasable with a second currency called Battle Bucks. Battle Bucks would have been earned through playing the game and be able to be used in the seasonal shop to buy consumables, emotes, and victory poses. I'm glad Epic decided not to go with this direction because it just seems like such a big grind. And at 24, when Chapter 2 Season 8 dropped, we got the season key art where most people focused on Carnage. But the key art actually had a small detail that still hasn't been fully explained. JB Chimpanski was holding what looks like a sideways shotgun. At the time, we had the sideways rifle and minigun in game, but we never saw this shotgun released. In later promotional images, Epic quietly updated JB Chimpanski to be holding a railgun instead. I'm not sure why Epic decided not to include the sideways shotgun in that season. It definitely would have been an interesting weapon for the loot pool. At 25, also in Chapter 2 Season 8, the servers for Fortnite China were officially shut down. The Chinese version of Fortnite worked a little bit different. Multiple people could win a victory royale in a single match. If you got a lot of kills, it would give you the option to leave the match and get a victory. This helped make the game a little bit more casual, and Fortnite China also couldn't show things like bones or skulls, so there's quite a few cosmetics that appear differently. Skins like Jules, Brutus, Eternal Voyager. Another thing that was different was V-Bucks. V-Bucks were actually free. All players earned 400 V-Bucks every 6 days. The official Fortnite China was shut down due to their strict policies on microtransactions and concern for amount of playtime. So I guess it really wasn't that profitable for Epic to keep it going. And at 26, there was actually a part of the Chapter 3 finale that didn't make the actual cut. In this video, you can see the alien ship attempts to abduct the 0 point after the island explodes. But then the mothership appears to explode and the 0 point escapes. Then there were 3 chrome-looking blobs that followed it, which people believed were related to Origin, Scientist, and the Visitor. The community really went wild with the theories after seeing the cut footage, and it may have helped the overall storyline a bit more because that event was not very well received. And at 27, in Chapter 1, Season 5, Epic was working on adding a flamethrower into the game. However, it didn't even set builds on fire because fire wasn't working properly, and that wasn't implemented until Chapter 2, Season 3. But in Chapter 4, Season 1, an item called Firefly Launcher appeared in the files, and it was basically a burst flamethrower that shot out 5 Firefly jars out at once. There was a common and a rare version of the weapon, and both versions did set wood instructions on fire, and it looks absolutely insane and was in the files for the entirety of chapter 4, but it was removed in chapter 5 and never actually showed up in game. And at 28, in chapter 6 season 1, we got one of the community's favorite festival icons, Hatsune Miku. However, Miku wasn't the planned Fortnite festival icon for this time. It was actually supposed to be New Jeans, and there was a ton of information about their skins coming. All the members were going to get a skin, there was going to be a concert, and Epic had big plans for this collaboration. But due to reported issues between the group and their label, the collab was pulled last minute, and Epic pivoted and added Miku instead. And while fans were still hyped, it kind of explains why the Miku collab felt less love compared to the Sabrina Carpenter collab. And finally, at 29, as of June this year, Fortnite officially stopped producing physical V-Buck cards. Instead, they're shifting everything over to Fortnite gift cards that you can buy directly through Fortnite or the Epic Store. If you're someone who likes grabbing V-Buck cards at the store, you won't be seeing them for much longer. These are 29 obscure and lost media facts about Fortnite. I can't believe there's so many things about this game that people do not know to this day, even though it's been out for 8 years. Thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you guys in the next one.